Here we go again. That was the reaction today from a federal judge in Mississippi who struck down the state's new 6-week abortion ban as unconstitutional. In November, Judge Carlton Reeves blocked an earlier attempt by Mississippi lawmakers to ban abortion after 15 weeks because it infringed upon women's rights. Today, Judge Reeves ruled the new ban prevents a woman's free choice, which is central to personal dignity and autonomy. This injury outweighs any interest the state might have in banning abortions after the detection of a fetal heartbeat. Now, this comes on the same day that Missouri's Republican Governor Mike Parsons signed into law a bill making abortion illegal after 8 weeks of pregnancy, except in cases where there is serious health risk to the pregnant woman. Like the bill passed in Alabama last week, Missouri's bill does not include exceptions for cases of rape or incest. Doctors who perform the procedure could be charged with a felony and face up to 15 years in prison. The ACLU and Planned Parenthood vowed to stop the law from going into effect in August, and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch reports that conservative donor David Humphreys is planning to, quote, bankroll a ballot initiative in 2020 seeking to undo the changes. Missouri is now the 6th state that this year has passed legislation restricting abortion access. Alabama's ban is the most restrictive in the nation, outlawing abortion at every stage of pregnancy. This morning, the ACLU and Planned Parenthood filed a lawsuit challenging Alabama's law, and these efforts are part of a broader assault on women's rights from Republican state lawmakers who have stated that their goal is to bring a new legal fight before a more conservative Supreme Court in an effort to overturn Roe v. Wade. But a new CBS News poll shows that 67% of Americans want the Supreme Court to keep Roe v. Wade as it is. And thousands took to the streets in cities across the country on Tuesday to protest the onslaught of extreme abortion bans by Republicans. After the break, we'll discuss the fight to protect women's rights with Anna Marie Cox, who's working on a month-long podcast series about abortion.
This is an issue for all people. It's about the rights of all people.
We deserve basic human rights in this country. We deserve civil rights in this country. We deserve autonomy for our body in this country.
We are here to say enough is enough. We're going to fight you, and we're going to win.
At the Stop the Bans protest on Tuesday, Democratic presidential candidates vowed to take on Republicans and Donald Trump in 2020 to protect women's rights. Anna Marie Cox is back with us. She is working on a month-long podcast series about abortion. Anna Marie, good to see you back here. Vice News obtained documents of GOP's secret talking points to get national Republicans to defend, in particular, the Alabama law, one that most people are calling the harshest of the laws. Let me just read an excerpt from these talking points. Conservative leaders are urging members to defend the Alabama law using the justification that an abortion would be committing more violence against a woman who was raped or survived incest. Committing a second violent act with abortion to a woman who has already been victimized by an act of rape or incest could physically or psychologically wound her further, the document states. Every single child should be afforded the opportunity to live, regardless of how they were conceived. The guidance advises that Alabama's law is a bold new pro-life legislation. Unfortunately, the media is attempting to use these new developments to create gotcha moments for Republicans and divide within our party, it states. Tell me what you think of that.
Well, I think, first of all, we should make very clear that there is no scientific evidence to back up the fact that there is psychological damage incurred upon a woman who gets an abortion. In fact, of the studies that we have, most show that women tend to if not actually be grateful for the fact they got an abortion, to consider it something that they did. They don't have like an opinion one way or another on. It was something they did for their health at some point in their life. And indeed, 1/3 of women in America will get an abortion at some point during their reproductive life. And that actually gets me to sort of my larger point here, which is that as much as I like to see women who believe in reproductive justice standing up to these very draconian laws, and as bad as a look as I think it is to defend these laws, the freedom of choice has been under attack for decades in this state. And in Mississippi in particular, like over 90% of the women in Mississippi live in a county without an abortion provider. There's only 2 abortion providers in the entire state. The abortion rate is a third than it is the national level. 1/3 of the women of childbearing age in Mississippi, if they want to get an abortion, they have to travel 25 miles each way. Mississippi requires an ultrasound, it requires counseling, it requires a waiting period. Those are all things that if you care about a woman's right to choose, you should be marching in the streets about those as well. I mean, it's in some ways, you know, it is cathartic to see the fight be about these incredibly extreme bills. But there's a part of me that feels like those fights might not last very long. I don't think the Supreme Court is going to go in that direction. Instead, what I think is a longer-term problem is the chipping away at Roe. Because, as I'm sure you know, there is no affirmative right to reproductive justice.
Right.
You know, it's something that is just implied. And so it's hard to protect.
And it is happening in state after state. There are upward of 30 states that have imposed some restrictions. They just don't look like Alabama's or Mississippi's or Missouri's.
Right. And I think that if you want to put on your marching shoes, you probably should put on your marching shoes and go to your state capital, because most states have enacted these kinds of laws. They're called TRAP laws, and they're designed to limit the opportunities that a woman has to do reproductive health. Not just abortions, by the way. Reproductive health in general gets hurt when these laws get enacted.
That's right. Ana Marie Cox, good to see you again. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.